afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of Level Up Cyber Live. My name is Tony Bryan, and I am your host. And I am very excited, honored. I don't know what adjective or adverb we want to use for the day, but really looking forward to the discussion today with Joe Blanchard. Joe, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
So Joe and I have been hanging out, much like it seems to be a trend, right? I don't know, 6 or 7 years in a couple different roles and iterations, but really got introduced first through your work at OWASP and some of the stuff you were doing here locally in the St. Louis market. But without giving too much away, man, I'd love to have you just introduce yourself, a little bit about who you are, how you got started and where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as Tony mentioned, my name is Joe Blanchard. Like many, I started back in the day before their security was really security. It was looked at differently. I started as a software engineer, building basically retail websites and kind of moved on from there. I was blessed to work for the Department of Defense as a contractor for a while, where I guess I learned some things, both good and bad, standards, policies, practices, the ways of building things in essence. It was while I was there, I made that jump from, I guess, the dev engineering side over to security. I remember it very clearly. I think my boss's boss sat down next to me one day and asked me the question, Joe, what exactly do you do here? And, obviously everyone's, the normal reactions, well, I'm fired. But in reality, it was, hey, we're creating this new role, not entirely sure exactly what it is, but we need an engineer that can understand and work on some code and fix some vulnerabilities. And help guide some teams on certain practices. Later, that role would basically be called application security. And that's kind of how I fell in there. And basically, it's been a career of that the last decade plus going forward. From there, I hung up my DoD shoes with the government, and I moved over to the corporate side. And I've been blessed to work in several fintechs, insurance, just financial general sector. And then I finally moved over in the last 5-6 years to Web3 and crypto. It's kind of the new frontier of fintech. And I tell you, it's definitely a place where you need to know some stuff and have some game. But the adventure is quite amazing. Yeah, you meet some amazing people. You learn every day. Every day there's new stuff, not just in security, but in the world of what we're building in those products. And so as of today, I'm the CIO and CISO, owning both IT, security, DevOps, etc. At a beautiful little company called Swirlds Labs, working on the Hedera project. And I'm excited to be here. And again, work with some amazing people on quite frankly, the future. And so it's exciting in all aspects. I kind of get what I love out of the security piece, but at the same time, you get to see some cool cutting edge products being built on a daily basis. And it's pretty great.
So, working on the future. You sound a little bit like Doc from Back to the Future. If you get it up to speed, we're going to take off. So the timing of this discussion is actually great, right? So last week we had Chris Miller with ATB Technologies, and we had a really good discussion around, what does it mean? How does a small business jump in and start a cybersecurity program? There's a lot of layers to this, and it requires smart people like Joe's and Chris to come in and really help kind of navigate some of those things. So we dove into MSSPs and MSPs and advantages and all those things into it.
Right.
So we get that all in place, but then there are tons and tons and tons of tools that currently exist that are out there that are going to be your silver bullet, right? They're going to solve all of your identity access management challenges, or they're going to make sure that your two-factor authentication is great and your web traffic is going to be that, and it's going to scour the dark web to predict breaches, and we're all going to sail off in the sunset, and this is all going to solve this problem.
Someone's drinking the Kool-Aid, Tony. Keep going.
I'm not paid by anybody to say those things, but it's I feel like there's some sarcasm there where I think right before we even hopped on, we were just talking about the CyberSeek data. And the numbers, right? And like how that right. Data set really, in my mind, has only been used to sell things, right? Like products or services, and I think, I'm looking forward to today's discussion because I know we did this talk, I don't know, a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago during Tech Week, and we talked about all the tools, and I'm still reeling in my brain at the amount of money being spent on these things across the sector, right? And I hope you left that data in there a little bit so people can just start to get a glimpse as we start to go down this discussion. But it's freaking crazy, right? And so I will caveat: there's no single tool that's going to solve your problem. It's going to be a combo of humans and technology and software, right? But we're going to dive into some of this stuff here, and Joe's going to give us, a little bit of a glimpse into all the different tools that exist. And I think, in the way he's packaged this in a really good way is all the different areas and subjects that it actually covers. So with that, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you. We'll pop in and out every once in a while for some questions, as we go. But with that.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, I guess, this is one of those I think we have 30 minutes on the call today, right, Tony? And this is a conversation that we're going to blink and the 30 minutes is going to be over. So I'm going to try to drill through some of this as I want, but I want to call out some critical pieces, as we go. Obviously, if you're a startup or even a big org, everyone comes at this just a little different. And I'm not a sales guy. I'm a tech guy on my own in the security world. And I have to use these things. There was the Scotty from Star Trek always said, the right tool for the right job. So that's kind of what I'm drilling down to, some of the tips and tricks in that same aspect. Real quick, again, I'm Joe Blanchard. I'm just going to flash this up here really quick. If there's any follow-ups, by all means, feel free to email me after the fact or reach out to anyone from OWASP. We're happy to contribute or answer your questions. So although it's partially covered, it's very easy to find numerous tools along the way. Being that, those of us in tech, a lot of us in security are also former engineers, or I guess not former, it's almost like a Marine. You're always an engineer. We like to build things to solve our problems. And there's a lot of problems out there. There's a lot of technologies, and more technologies lead to other technologies. And how do we secure all the things? How do we do our due diligence, and how do we govern them responsibly? And how do we not just secure the things, but verify we're securing all things? Anyway, big general overarching questions. The good news for sales guys and other builders is they will always be able to sell us on the new and latest, greatest thing, because we always have that problem. But as you can see here, I've identified numerous areas, everywhere from AppSec to cloud security to how do we handle identity, operational security, like blue teams, and the list goes on and on and on. There's so many caveats, and for every one of those, there's probably 1,000 different tools for multiple use cases. And so we're going to get into some of those. Before we ever even get into the tools, though, and this is where a lot of people get lost. They'll see a shiny ad, or they talk to the salesperson at Black Hat or DEF CON or RSA, and they get sold a problem. Before someone sells you a problem, maybe we should very clearly define, internally amongst ourselves, what are our problems, or what are our objectives? What are we trying to get and solve for? And then from there, we can build a list of priorities, and then we can function these things out. Because it's silly for us to go through a whole exercise, if anyone's ever worked with legal on NDAs and MSAs and SOWs, to go through this whole kit and caboodle. And really, you're buying something that solves a problem that you don't even need until a year or two down the road. You have much bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And with those, you always want to define clear objectives. What is the goal we're trying to achieve with a new security tool? And again, it redefines: do we need a security tool, or do we just need better standards and practices and methodologies internally amongst ourselves? So we go through there. And the other piece is assess capability. Evaluate how well a new tool actually integrates with your existing security infrastructure or infrastructure at large, including hardware, software. Do they talk? Are there integrations? Are they totally incompatible? Are you a company that operates entirely 100% on-prem, but yet the tool you're looking at is entirely and only SaaS? That kind of breaks your model there. So again, you want to assess all those things to make sure you're knocking on the right doors. And again, cliche, but time is money, and there's never enough people working on our team. So if you can cut down the process and define these things just a little bit better, and have like a project charter that defines things for you, more is the better. Develop a deployment plan. I think some of us that have been around for a while have always seen, hey, we've bought this great tool. Somehow we got it through legal in record time. That's amazing. We've done procurement. We have the tool, but our SREs, our DevOps teams, etc., they're backed up with 6 months worth of work before they can even get to this thing. So we're literally going to be paid for it for X amount of time, and not actually be able to squeeze the juice out of this tool. So have a deployment plan, know what resource allocation looks like, knows what timelines are realistic and will look like. Sometimes you don't know all these until you hit the ground running, but usually if you've been around long enough, you can guesstimate to a degree. Good hard data is always a little bit better, and experience is always a winner. Of course, conduct a risk assessment. Identify the potential risks associated with any new tool, such as data leakage, privacy concerns, or increased attack surface. We'll pick on like an ITAM or IT asset management tool. If you're bundling all this data from across your entire enterprise in this one centralized location, that's a lot of critical, sneaky stuff all in one place. And if you're SaaS and the company you're working with isn't up to snuff, so to speak, you took a big gamble or a big risk. And obviously, risk are things we talk about all the time. And can be mitigated in different ways. But again, those are things to bear in mind. You can't mitigate something you don't understand or know about. So again, conduct a risk assessment, look at all those things. Again, SaaS versus on-prem versus, maybe a hybrid model. We'll see. How does data go back and forth? What are the integrations? How do we do access control? Numerous questions to ask. And again, the good news is you don't have to reinvent this stuff. These things are out there. You can pull down a list, a document, etc., and it'll help you out. Allocate resources. This kind of goes back to one of the previous ones in that, we have the tool. Do we have the manpower to run it and actually use the tool? Not just install it. There's always that upfront work, but actually on a day-to-day basis. If we have an intelligence tool that's going out and scraping the dark web for all this magical, scary stuff out there, do we have someone actually looking at the reports either on a daily or weekly basis? Have we set up the alerts? Have we done all these things? Can we effectively operate this tool, or did we just spend money to look good and do some security theater? That also goes hand in hand to train your team. If it's a tool that kind of mirrors others and it's really intuitive, great. You're kind of off to the races running. Some tools, they have a steep learning curve. I'll throw out, if you're using a SIM like a Splunk and you don't know how to write a query, you might be in a little bit of trouble. But going out and learning and teaching some of those things, or if modifying some kind of new script or integration, requires some Python, but you don't have anyone that knows any Python. Training up on those things, not just how to use the tool, but the bits that go along with, again, squeezing the juice out of this thing.
Yeah, I know. This tools are cool, man. You know what I mean? Like you get a good salesperson that comes in and tells you all the neat things that this thing's going to do. And Salesforce is one in my brain that does a really good job, right? Like you and I both know, Salesforce is a cat. It's it's a Ferrari. You know what I mean? It'll go 900 million miles an hour. Mm-hmm. If you train your team, you know how to do it, and you have the ability to customize it. If you don't, you've got a really fancy phone book that gives you a little bit of functionality to like search some things. So I think
consistency is a big part of that as well. Are we consistent in how we use some of these tools, or is it one we just knock the dust off, once a quarter, so we stay, we're hitting whatever our compliance checks are, and we can appropriately exactly.
The other thing that pops in my head is, and I'm sure you're going to cover this, is to think through. So I need a tool that does this. And I'm going to need a tool to do this thing, is to making sure that the ability of those two things to interact or communicate with one another, instead of having, if you have 10 tools you're using, have 10 independent tools, or you have 10 tools that are integratable through API, right? So really thinking through not just training teams, but allocating your resources.
That's a great point. Let's talk about that for just a moment. So, at least in the AppSec world, or I guess security in general, we have all these things that are looking at all these different areas. But, at the end of the day, when, you're at a leadership level, or a manager, you're trying to pull us together and actually see and articulate risk. And so if I have a little bit of risk over there and a little bit over there and a little bit over there, like in 10 different places, it's hard to pull it together to a single pane of glass. The cool part about that is there are tools whose sole job is to pull all those things together into a single pane of glass. So again, and that's a category as well, we often want to look at, because again, if you have to look in 10 different places, or pull a report manually so often, you're going to miss stuff. And again, as leaders, it's a big part of our job to triage and identify the priority. Where do we need, we only have so many man hours. We only have so much, budget available anywhere. I mean, I think no matter who you are, what size company you're dealing with, that's just the reality of it. But so, where do you focus those things? So you need a way to, again, pull that stuff in accurately, and I guess make those decisions. It's like we may not get to everything the first 6 months, or this might be something we'll have to wait to Q4. But the point is having a plan and at least knowing it's there and existing and keeping a regular eye on it. So absolutely, Tony. I will continue on. Okay. Establish clear roles and responsibility. Know who owns this thing. Not just from the engineering standpoint is, someone maintains the server and make sure it's patched. Yes, those things are absolutely too. But who's responsible for contract renewals? Who's responsible for the day-to-day checking for those vulnerabilities or whatever you have in there? Who's in charge of teaching? So if it's a security tool, but say engineering has to participate. Who's ensure about fostering that relationship and championing this tool so that everybody uses it? And of course, everyone is going to roll their eyes here, but it's so critical. Develop and document policies and procedures. The document piece there is, I would underline that. I should have already. It's one thing to say, oh, this is just how we do it and verbally spoken, but people come, people leave, policies change. Document those things, put them on paper, whether you have a wiki or a Notion or a Google Docs. I guess different companies work in different ways, but document those things and share them. People get hit by buses. It's a thing. Further, when there's a dispute or debate or disagreement down the road, those are the documents you can point to, and they can better guide and foster any further discussions or, be consistent in what those policies are. Inconsistency will kill you. It adds to ad hoc work, unscheduled work. And if we can avoid those things, more is the better. And of course, conduct testing and validation. Do a POC if it's available. Some places will ask you to pay for a POC. That's a load of junk. In most use cases, as long as you define what that POC is, no one's going to ask you to pay. If they do, I guess that's on you. I think that's the exception, but I've run into that a few different times. Further, monitor and evaluate performance. Are we getting the value out of this thing? Is the service staying up, or do we have to kick the box every 3 days? How effective is this? We've rolled out training programs before where the training itself was great, and we integrated it with with our SSO, so everyone could log in very easily. We've led the horse to water, but nobody was drinking. And so we spent all this money, hundreds of dollars or whatever it was per user for a big company. And I think, we're getting a 10% return maybe. Well, that's not very effective. We're not using our dollars very wisely, or maybe we have missed some of these other previous steps that I've already talked about, and we didn't push it out or market it appropriately. So all things to consider. Again, it's dollars and cents. Are we getting value out of what we're doing? And again, there's numerous ways to evaluate if you're meeting your needs on whatever the tool is or service. Further, solicit feedback. Maybe before we go out and buy this big shiny new thing, I guess yes, on the security side, do we need it? But let's say even on the IT operation side, if you're rolling out this new thing, device management or what have you to the company, do they see the need? Do they have any feedback? Oh, well, we're 80%, Mac and 10% Windows, and we have these flavors of Linux sitting over here. Solicit that back from the various pieces, so you can then help make decisions, as well as if down the road a tool or whatever it was just sucks or could very well be doing great. Oh my God, you guys installed this thing and it's the best thing since sliced bread. Get that feedback. Because obviously, things renew. Whether you're signing a 6 month, a year, a 2 year, 5 year, whatever it was, it's good to know that stuff. And of course, plan for updates and maintenance. This is the life of things. Things need to be patched. If you're going SaaS, hey, more power to you. Someone's going to do those patches for you, and they're just going to send you an update. But if you're running stuff on-prem, plan out that work cycle. Know that your team every 6 months, year, whatever it need, however those patches come out, is going to have to set some time aside and do their general maintenance. It happens everywhere, big and small, and so just be mindful of that and plan that accordingly. Don't wait until you have like a flood of 0 days and you're going through some kind of audit to get that done. That being said, I kind of summarized some of these additional notes. Is number one, most security folks have a love-hate relationship with their tools. Again, the right tool for the right job. Do not become attached to any particular tool. Tools are going to come and go. Companies are going to get bought and sold. Focus instead of on the tool, focus on function. What is the function, or what is the goal I'm trying to achieve? So if I'm looking at a SaaS product, instead of me loving SaaS product A, I love the function and I need to hit these criteria to be effective. And so if anything ever happened to that particular tool, what else is on the docket? Where can I go and what can I look at? I'm not upset about the tool, but I'm upset about losing the function. The other piece is find a partner or tech advisor if you can. There are other companies out there that resell for other groups. I have one. Please forgive me. I'm not going to throw the name out because you can message me privately. I'm happy to share that then. But if I say, hey, I need to solve X problem, I've defined it, yada, 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 bring me options. This individual, this partner, this tech advisor will go out and find me 1, 2, 3 options, whatever's appropriate. And they will come back to me without me having to go out and spend that time and say, Joe, this is what's top of the market. This is what we're seeing, yada, yada, yada. And that's a place to start the conversation. And I can very quickly say, well, I hate that one already. Those 2 are possible options. That one's way out of my budget. And then you can move forward. So go ahead, Tony.
So that segue was perfect to Otis Osborne, who had a question for you. Is what is important for businesses to, it was a 2-parter. So we'll start with the first part. What is important for businesses to automate, right? Like we all know AI and automation is important, but like what are some of the things that we should be looking at up front to automate, to free up time? Is there a sequence? And I'm glad you mentioned the concierge kind of guy that helped, because I know I was going to ask you about it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously I think the easy answer is you want to automate all the things. There's a cost with that because when you automate all the things, you have to update all the things. There's also the difference between, do we build an automation or is there an out of the box automation? It may cost a little bit more. Or is a professional services that someone's going to keep updated for me. Because again, and those are trade-offs. Because remember, if you write it, you own it. You have to operate that piece. With that being said, there is a lot of automation already out there. And so when we talk about tools, they come in multiple different grades. Often we're talking about enterprise grade tools. And I guess even though, some companies play loose with that enterprise term, that generally means there's certain out-of-the-box functionality in that not only will the tool do its job, but there's those primary integrations. You have the ones so it'll talk to Okta and Splunk and Jira and ServiceNow and all those other critical things that run your company. So not only do you have the tool, but now you have all those automated pieces that will allow you to take what the tool is doing and make it actionable. And again, it all depends on the tool and really what you're trying to solve. But if you have this tool, but you can't do anything with it, or it's all manual and very difficult to pull out, then you're just causing pain for yourself. And so maybe, keep looking. And it's going to be cliche to say this, but sometimes you do pay for what you get. This sales guy over here may catch you a deal and it's half the price of the competitor over here. But at the end of the day, are you solving that problem, that goal that you initially set out for? Or are you only solving maybe half the problem? Or you're solving it, but I got to hire 2 more FTEs just to compensate and make it workable. So good question. Yeah. Automate all the things, make life easier for yourself. Don't be afraid to consult other members of your team and use those resources. If you have a guy who's just a whiz with Python or a whiz with whatever it was, maybe get them to consult with you, or pull in. It's like, hey, we got to write this thing, or I got to build a connector, whatever it is. Bring them into the loop, have that conversation. Don't be afraid. So
his second part was, how is Terraform and Ansible used to ensure success for automations?
Oh, good question. So Yeah, it depends on the company. I guess at a certain level of maturity when it's there. I did get. Oh gosh, I think we probably spend there's probably entire sessions on this question. I don't want to deflect that, but yeah, absolutely, yeah. Take those things into consideration. Use what's appropriate. I guess we live in a world of infrastructure as code now as well, so we can even talk about Kubernetes and a bunch of other stuff on how that works. Yeah, no, there's a big piece there. I think maybe that should be a bigger topic and also down the road. I also want, I guess, on my next point too is there's also commercial versus open source. A lot of smaller companies will generally start with open source. There's a lot of good tooling out there. OWASP has some tools available for some early stuff. If you go out to GitHub and some other places, there's supported projects. But a lot of times when we're talking about enterprise grade stuff, we're talking about commercial tooling. Things we're actually going to pay money for or additional support. And so in that support piece is kind of the make or break. And open source stuff, you might find some YouTube videos, which I think we've all lived on YouTube videos, and that's great. But if I need to bring in, a professional services piece to do whatever adjustment is, the commercial side will generally have that a little bit faster, a little bit easier. And then I guess the last piece is, before I get into the next group, I am not in sales in any way. I've just bought and spent a lot of money over the last decade. And I've cried, torn, and loved some of these tools in that same time. Yeah.
So another question asked by our friend Scott Hudson from Mercy.
Sure.
Do you ever go out to RFP for the right tools, or you put out what you need, submit it out, and make people send back to you for bid? Are you have you ever done that?
I have. That's actually, for me though, that's generally been the exception. I can literally count on one hand the time, only because I guess the RFP, obviously you want things to go out and bid and come back. In my role, I generally try to stay under the radar. So I even mentioned that tech partner and tech advisor. Part of what I love about going to that wish is I tell them what I need, and in essence, they almost do the RFP for me. And so the end product or the sales guy doesn't even know it's me asking the questions because it's done through the partnership. And I kind of foster that as long as I can, because I think we've all had sales guys chasing us, especially at the end of certain quarters when they're trying to hit their goals. So if I can keep my name and my company out of their contact list a little bit longer, that's what I do. In that regard, no. I guess maybe I'm weak on that side. We've only done a handful of RFPs in my time.
RFPs are tough. I mean, if you're an organization that I think a lot of vendors would follow or want, I think you would get a lot of proposals. I know we've done some RFPs, and we're not, CyberUp's not large by any means. So if we're wanting accounting services, not technology related, but accounting services, and we would want to get, in theory, you want at least 3 options to weigh, right? To screen and vet and see, for price comparison, customer service comparison, onboarding things. And, I know for us, we're not basing a decision off of solely price, right? If, I'm not going to buy the cheapest tool always, I'm going to buy the tool that's going to work best for us. And, sometimes that's going to cost more and it's probably going to be better, but RFP has been a hard thing. I think just, you got to get in the right hand of people.
I'll throw in there too, if you have that partner or tech advisor, and some of these guys actually run their own labs. And what I mean by that is, like, if you need to do a POC or you want to see a bake-off, some of these partners and advisors, again, they have their own engineering team that will go out and actually build this in their environment, basically based on some of your criteria, and they will do a bake-off for you right then and there and then show you the data. Because we may not always have the hours or the time to do that ourselves, So just an option as well. Sorry, I didn't get deeper into the RFP thing as well. That's a really good question. I guess I feel like maybe I've been blessed and that I've never been forced to do that as often as I needed to. We
got questions coming in out the wazoo. This might be the most interactive ever, Joe. I mean, you're just such a hot topic. So 2 more questions.
Yeah.
We can go over time a little bit. Obviously, I don't know if you have anything on your. I'm free, but
I have a little extra time. We can keep going.
So what resources would you recommend a business/employee use to fill knowledge gaps?
Oh, great question. So different. I'm just going to go back, and again, this is me talking here. Different people, different groups learn in different ways. So if you have, you can hire or contract. Obviously, you hire towards it. I guess I know this is a cliche too. Yeah, you kind of hire your weakness. You don't need 10 guys on a single team that are all the exact same guy. You always have that one or two you want to clone. But you want to hire towards that. The hard part of that is knowing, hey, what skills do I need a year from now? Maybe in my next couple of roles, those are what I aim for and what I hire or put in the job rec. And so, identifying those early if you can, I think it is great. As far as sources of knowledge, I've been blessed, and obviously when we hire, you look for individuals who have that thirst for knowledge, if that makes sense. I know what I know, but I know there's a world of things tomorrow that I need to learn, and those are the people you always try to hire first. So that basically, in some manners, it always takes care of itself to a degree, or at least you can identify the I don't know what I know. With that being said, obviously, conferences are great. I think conferences spark the insight, though. They don't necessarily always teach. They always give you hey, here's this topic. You may know like 5% of it, but I'm going to get you really excited. So independently on your own, you go and learn the rest. At least that's how it's worked for me. I also advise some of the smaller conferences. There's a lot of those if you look around. St. Louis, I think, is burgeoning a little bit. I think we're doing better. But even if you just look in the Midwest and just outside, there's ThoughtCon in Chicago. There's was it CornCon up in Iowa, just Davenport, I think it is. That's coming up. Look at the topics. I guess get people there, or again, hire the skills. There's always the online learning as well. I find this kind of a hit or miss in that it's hard to get excited sometimes over the online stuff as much. We can go through and we can practice. If there's a sandbox involved, there's always a bonus. Those usually cost a little bit more, and that's fine. You go through and you can experiment and do the skills testing there. Book and reading is always great. You have more questions, Tony?
We got two more. We're going to skip one and come back to that in a sec. So sure. What is your opinion on using Gartner as a tool for finding tools?
Gartner's been around a long time. I do read Gartner. I don't pay Gartner, at least not the last couple roles. But they put some good stuff out. They help you rank the stuff. Usually, what I look at them for is when they roll out some of their reports, is I like to see the up and coming stuff. Because every now and then you'll find a winner. Like you go to a conference and you will run across the sales guy and he tells you about this thing. Like, oh, that sounds really cool. Where are you guys in implementation or making a live? Oh, we're a year or two out. So that year or two later down the road, when you see them pop up on the scale, it's kind of exciting. It's like, I remember when they were like a nothing shop. And so you see them come up, and there's a lot of tools like that. I remember, we're gonna go back a ways. I'm gonna show my age here a little bit. There's a SaaS tool called Checkmarks. And I remember when they were really small, going after, I think at the time it was HP Fortify. I think HP owned them. And they were kind of like one of the behemoths to beat. And I remember like going early, oh, they have incremental scanning and I don't have to do the full build. I can just do this, I can do this other really easy scan or what have you. And it was solving some of my problems. And it was great. I remember getting like a really good price on them. And then like 2 years later, they like shot all the way up to much higher on the scale. And obviously when my contract renewed came, it hurt a little bit. But anyway, it's good to see that stuff. And maybe you can get in early and at least even learn, see what the options are. But no, Gartner's good. It's good. I think it's not the end all be all. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty too. But it's a good place to start.
I know for me, and this is maybe a piece of advice. I love people in general. Mm-hmm. And I find that I'm a sucker and I'm a little bit gullible to a good salesperson that knows how to stroke and put, like stroke my ego and give me enough to like make me feel good about myself. And maybe I'm giving up, publicly giving out too many tips and tricks to sell some stuff to CyberUp. But how do you balance, liking, they're good sales folks for a reason. How do you balance product to attachment, or to the person who's selling you the thing? Like, what do you have any like hard things you're implementing to kind of prevent that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that is that slippery slope. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening to you. I would say, a lot of companies will have basically almost like an ethics clause. And that will say like, hey, it's don't accept a gift or a meal over whatever it was. And then, and that's like, that's a hard control, like almost like a technical control that you would have. And I think it's normal for companies to have that. That being said, yeah, it's some of these sales guys are easy to like. They're nice guys. And I like to be a people person as well, as much as a techno nerd as I want to be. You just be mindful of that. I found like in history, I tend to be more loyal to people over companies and products. So like I've worked with sales guys only because, and this sounds like cliche, they were relatively trustworthy and they were kind of straight shooters. And they've worked at multiple different companies and products. And so, I would generally take their call maybe over some of the other ones that I didn't know or I didn't trust as well. So there is value in kind of identifying some of those people and building the relationships. Again, you always want to be careful. At the end of the day, it's business. And I think they get that just as much as hopefully, we get that as well. That, it's like, go and have the drink, but, don't accept the Ferrari kind of situation. So
Ferrari would be nice. But all right, so last question since we're to wrap up. What is some advice that you would give to the people, folks to level up their we're just going to say level up their cyber. We'll keep it broad enough for the topic today.
No, absolutely. And it's not going to sound sexy. Fundamentals. Really, especially if you're trying to get in, a lot of people want to aim, and I guess I've had a lot of conversations with younger folks. They want to go straight for the security certificates, and that's great. And if you have the skills for it, go for it. There's absolutely no harm in that. But generally, when I'm looking to make a hire or fill a role, the cert's nice, but I want the functionality. Do you understand everything you're talking about it behind? If you're going to be doing some network security, yeah, you passed the security test, but do you understand how networks work? Do you understand those fundamentals and principles? If you're going to be doing AppSec, yeah, you can explain to me what a cross-site scripting vulnerability is. That's great. But can you explain to me, how do we fix it in Java or .NET or whatever it is? And, can you explain it to an engineer? Have some chops in there. And I would much rather you have those chops or spend the time learning those particular fundamental skills of IT than necessarily focusing on those security bits right away. And all of that just comes down to, experience and attitude. And the attitude right there is like the X factor. Stay curious, express that curiosity. It's like we don't know everything, and it's okay to admit that. There's a lot of new stuff coming out, and it's almost impossible to stay on top of it all. But being curious about parts of that, and showing that I've done these things. Go start a GitHub account. Go join some open source projects. Participate, understand the functionalities, and the rest will follow. I promise, if you have a right attitude and you have a basic threshold of IT and security skills, your career will unfold usually in great ways, as long as you do all the basics. You're a good person. So
show up, do the right thing, be a good person.
Absolutely.
Like that accounts for many things in life. But Joe, I appreciate you hanging out today. I think it is that there's tools are important, people are important. All of it is a moving target of how we're going to protect our networks, right? And I think you'll see this is a great segue. So next week's episode will be just me. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the future of CyberUp and some of the things we spent the last 6 months working on who we are, what we're doing, where we're going as an organization. We're due for a strategic plan update of, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like as an organization. And and you've alluded to it a couple times here today, Joe, the pace in which this industry has continued to grow is alarming, right? And the same could be said in terms of just the work that CyberUp does, the amount of organizations that have popped up over the last 7 years. And so, we felt it was a great time to really talk about, what does the next 3 to 5 year looks like, and I think more importantly than that, how people, companies, communities can get involved, because this does take a lot of different things. So it's, I think with some of the language we're coming out with, I know I'm excited about it. The board's very excited about it, because there's been a lot of effort and time put into what we're going to share next week. So we'll look into that, and that'll serve as really a kickoff to some content and some of the stories and things we're going to be putting out as a group. So this was a great segue before that, and we've got a few other great speakers after that one lined up. So I've enjoyed, we're halfway through the year, which is crazy to think of. It's June. It's almost July.
Yeah, right? I was just doing a report the other day, and it's like, holy crap, we're already, it's like we're this far into Q2.
We're halfway through the year. Yeah. It's nuts. So it's, it seemed like a great time to pause, reflect. This has been a lot of fun. We've had some great guests, like Joe, that have joined. So, if you want to come on and join us throughout the, now it's the end of the year, shoot me a note. Always looking for speakers. I've got it mapped out, all the way up to December. But Joe, appreciate you. And until next week, thanks for everybody and the great questions today, but appreciate everybody tuning in. So have a great week.
Thanks all.